Hi everybody. They say that the Quran is not the word of Allah. It is a book that Muhammad has fabricated and written. So let us disprove this ridiculous and absurd claim. Since Allah foresaw these slanders would be forwarded to Prophet, Allah wished him to be an illiterate servant who doesn't live in a separate place from that society. The polytheist nicknamed him Al-Amin. That means reliable person because he resolved the controversial issues of them with justice and was known also as a person who never told even a single lie. Isn't that enough to make the slanders meaningless? He was born from a noble and decent family. He grew up as an orphan in that society. He was commended as a dignified, calm, and decent child without any misconduct. Community leaders of Mecca offered him their daughters to marry and donated their camels and wealth just in return for giving up his prophecy. He turned down these offers and, risking death alone, entered the struggle on his right path and eventually succeeded in becoming the greatest revolutionary in the world. If he were a lustful man, lover of power and wealth, would he miss this opportunity presented to him? If he were a lustful person, would he marry a 40-year-old widow when he was 25 years old? And would he stay together for 25 years until his wife's death, and then would he wait 3 years for his other marriages? Allah trained him and moralized him with the moral values of the Quran as stated in the verse and chose him as a prophet who Muhammad is a person who speaks little but listens well, respectful, avoidant of waste, pure and shy. If he wrote the Quran himself, would he have mentioned in verses self-deprecating words of polytheist as called himself dishonest, crazy, magician and liar? Would he have made up verses accusing himself as they nearly diverted you from what we inspired to you so that you would fabricate something different against us? If we hadn't made you wholly firm, you might as almost have inclined unto them a little. Then we would taste you a double punishment. Then you couldn't find any helper against us. Although it is not a sign of prophecy for any prophet to memorize the descended book, and no one has expected such a thing, would he have taken such a heavy burden by actually memorizing the 6,236 verses? By saying in the verse that this book, which descended gradually in 23 years with revelation, would be memorized him and never would be forgotten. And as known, this verse has been realized. Before he died, would he have declared the completion of the Quran with a verse, and finally this verse also had come true? When a blind man interrupted while he was talking to others, he grimaced at the blind man for interrupting him. Although the blind man couldn't see his face, Allah reproached him with verses one after the other in Surah Abese. Would he make up verses that shame himself? How could he treat even his relatives equally and be fair? Would he make up verses for his wife accusing of adultery and talk about his private family life? Due to he was a shy person, he couldn't request people who kept him busy until midnight. Allah has warned them to go home and let him rest. If he were a reckless man who doesn't care about what is going on, then couldn't he ask them to let him sleep because of a late hour? Why would he say that Allah ordered the Tahajjud prayer, which is performed at 3 o'clock in the night, only obligatory for him, and perform this prayer every night without disturbing his wives and prayed until his feet swelled. Why couldn't any of his wives say that this was not true or not permanent? Some of his wives were the fearless daughters of the powerful caliphs, some were the daughters of the enemy, and they all converted to Islam willingly. Does it make sense to you that someone who made up the Quran wakes up and prays additionally every midnight? In spite of Allah has stated the fards of prayer and ablution in the Quran, why would he like to spend more time in worshipping by adding sunnahs to these as well? As a polygamous prophet, he was with affection, love, justice, sexual power, tolerance, cleanliness, and always smiling face to all his wives and was a perfect servant to Allah. Did any of his wives come out and blame him that he was a wicked man to haram? I mean, things that are forbidden by religion. Or did they say he was not actually what he seemed? Did he make up such a verse that after my death, none of my wives are halal, allowed to marry others? As he said, why even one of his wives did not marry someone after he passed away? Why, as an illiterate person, make up such scientific content verses that no one understood at his period and even didn't cause to increase their faith? But how these fabricated verses of an illiterate could be scientifically discovered centuries later? How a prophet asked to his companions in masjid, "If I hurt any of you, please let him come and whip me to get his right back." So a man said, "Yes, you hurted me, O messenger," and came forward. Then prophet demanded his whip to be brought. Can you imagine how a liar prophet allowed himself to be whipped in the masjid? Fortunately, it turns out that the man's intention was not to whip him, but to kiss the prophet's seal on his back to get in paradise. Allah has given him such calamities and difficulties as being stoned, starving, and facing death that, with his patience and dignity, shouldn't those who slander stop and think their injustice and cruelty to him? When the thoughts of civilizations such as the Sumerians, philosophers, scholars, and other religions living on earth about creation are compared scientifically, the only truth in all of them has been verses that he has said to have invented by himself. When the thoughts of civilizations such as the Sumerians, philosophers, scholars, and other religions living on earth about creation are compared scientifically, the only truth in all of them has been verses that he is said to have invented by himself. Today, it is known that the views of the philosophers of before Christmas do not have scientific competence and their views are incomplete. In this case, why those who slander to him do not appreciate Prophet as the philosopher of philosophers? While there were dozens of verses that were distorted and contradicted in the previous holy books, why weren't there any errors and contradictions in this book called Tales of Ancients? If the Quran that he fabricated is the tales of the ancients and is taken from other scholars, philosophers, and holy books, how can he correct their mistakes and deficiencies in this Quran? And many details, such as the city of Iram, which was found in the last centuries, are only mentioned in the book he made up. How dare he claim that a book like this, even at least one chapter of this book, could not be written while Arabs were so advanced in Arab literature and rhetoric? Why no one against him could not come together to refute his claim by putting forth at least one surah while he was alive? During the period of highest level in Arabic literature and eloquence, and the most meaningful poems and words were written on the Kaaba, why polytheists could not come out and blame him that the book is incomplete and wrong by some verses? How dare he say that his uncle and his wife will be punished in hell by Surah Tabbat since they didn't believe in Islam? His uncle Abu Lahab and his wife instructed to their sons to divorce the daughters of Prophet, and they insulted and accused the Prophet without a break. If Abu Lahab and his wife Jamil through the years could lie as always do, that saying we have been Muslim while he was alive or not, wouldn't Islam perish at the very beginning? What kind of a book did he make up that makes people sad and peaceful, even cry as you read them even today? Have you heard of a religious man crying while reading another holy book and someone crying while listening? In addition, how can this book, which has been invented by him, doesn't tire people for centuries and creates new openings in the minds of the people as they read and listen? Astonishingly, the book is the biggest and the only book on earth that even children can memorize. Even today, when you read it, your heart softens, you get emotional, keeps people away from the passion of life, gives peace, and makes even people cry. How can the one who invented the book has 1.5 billion ummah in the 21st century, and always he is the most loved person in the world? Despite not seeing him, millions of people send greetings him, get emotional, and even cry when his name is mentioned. Whoever sees him in his dream sees him truly. While we all dream ourselves and our family differently and ugly, the devil can't take his image in dreams. Why couldn't someone sincerely come out and say, I saw him in such an ugly way in my dream, or with an ugly request of him? What kind of a man is he who doesn't insult or hurt even one of his wives, doesn't even hit lightly, doesn't shout and behave badly? Did you ever hear that one of his wives complained for these reasons? How a handsome and fit prophet, whose young wife Hazrat Aisha loves him very much. Prophet Joseph was created by Allah as the most handsome man, and it is mentioned in Quran that 11 women, while they were eating fruit, suddenly Prophet Joseph appeared and they stared at him amazingly and cut their fingers because of his handsomeness. Hazrat Aisha says that if those women had seen his husband, they used to stab those knives in their chest. Can you imagine such a person being so modest and fair? What kind of a person he was that he wouldn't fear of anything, had no weakness, not addicted to something. He would show more love and compassion, especially to the elderly people, orphans, children, and animals. What kind of a man was he that, despite all his hard work, he would help his wives with the housework, stand up when their wives entered the room, and all his wives were dying to be with him? How could none of his wives did not complain that he had a bad habit and was behaving unjustly? How can there be a picture of Jesus Christ and Hazrat Ali, but not a picture of him? Because Allah only shows him to his loved ones in dreams. Isn't it not interesting that someone who sees him in reality and his dreams could not draw a picture of him? He freed his slaves, but the freed slave did not want to leave him because he was supplying them the same what he eats, what he drinks, and what he wears. He was also addressing them gently and politely. Can you ever imagine of someone who treated his slaves in history or to the workers like him even today? How is it that he married the woman who is divorced by his freed slave, and by doing so gives the slaves great status in the society. He even assigned the freed slave at the age of 19 to Damascus as the commander of the army while the other caliphs were alive. What kind of prediction and risk is that? Eventually, the freed slave won the victory and returned. How is it that he accepts the wrestling call of the powerful wrestler who challenged him, and without hesitation he accepts and knocks him down 3 times, one after another match? Although he is a prophet of prophets, how could be so humble, sitting on the same level with his companions and never allowed for himself any superiority and privilege? He made a mutual response of reading Quran with Angel Gabriel once a year. How did he feel the year he died and did it twice? Besides, he died a few months after he said in his farewell sermon, "Maybe I will not be able to meet you here again after this year." Isn't it a prophetic sign for a healthy person knowing ahead of time? How could he forgive the Wahshi who killed and took the heart out of beloved his uncle Hazreti Hamza, who was called Lion of Allah, the bravest and the strongest one in Arab tribe? Would a person who fabricated the Quran could forgive the Ethiopian slave since he wanted to be a Muslim? For now, this came to my mind. Many other additions can be made, dear friends. However, despite all this, the slanders and denials of some people unfortunately continue. Thank you for your watching me.